Before you correct the world, ask if you have corrected yourself. Before you lead others, ask if you have mastered your own conduct. This was the teaching of Confucius, not to chase power first, but to cultivate virtue. He did not begin with politics. He began with the person. A noble life, he taught, does not begin in the palace or the battlefield. It begins in the quiet discipline of one's own mind and manner. To rule others well, you must first rule yourself, your thoughts, your speech, your desires, your habits. This is not weakness. This is not passivity. This is the foundation of moral power. Confucius said, "If a man cannot govern himself, what right has he to govern others?" We live in an age where many wish to speak, to be seen, to influence the world. But few are willing to look inward. To correct what is unruly in themselves, we demand justice, yet do not act justly in private. We speak of peace, yet war within our own families. We call for change, but refuse to change our daily conduct. Confucius warned of this. The faults of a superior man are like the sun and moon. They have their faults, and everyone sees them. They change, and everyone looks up to them. Self-governance is not perfection. It is the willingness to be corrected, the commitment to walk uprightly even when unseen. He taught that there is a sacred order in the world, a chain of harmony that begins with the individual first. Cultivate the self. Then harmonize the family, then order the state, and only then bring peace to the world. Skip this order, and you build a house without a foundation. You may speak with authority, but your words will be hollow. You may lead, but you will lead badly. Why? Because when a man has not ruled himself, he becomes ruled by impulse, pride, envy, or fear. He projects his chaos onto the world and calls it leadership. But when a man has disciplined his heart, calmed his speech, and anchored his life in virtue, then his leadership requires no force. His presence teaches, his silence instructs. His life itself becomes the lesson. Confucius called this man the Junzi, the noble man. He is not noble by birth, but by effort. He does not shout to be heard. He listens to understand. He does not chase influence. He cultivates character. And in doing so, he becomes a center of gravity around which others naturally organize. So, if you wish to change the world, begin with how you speak to your parents, how you treat those below you, how you carry yourself when no one is watching. Because the self is the first kingdom. Rule it with wisdom, and the world will begin to follow. From the series, Rule the Self Before the World, Confucius on Inner Governance. Written in the moral, clear, and quietly commanding voice of Confucius, where inner integrity precedes public responsibility. Confucius said, "When a ruler's personal conduct is correct, his government is effective without the issuing of orders. If his personal conduct is not correct, he may issue orders, but they will not be followed." This is the first truth of Confucian leadership. Do not seek to rule the world before you have ruled your own character. Do not demand order from others if you have not brought order to yourself. In the Analects, Confucius repeatedly warns his students, those who chase power without virtue bring ruin, not only upon themselves, but upon their households, their communities, and their nations. Authority without self-cultivation is not leadership, it is dangerous noise. It may shout, but it cannot guide. It may command, but it cannot unify. Why? Because people do not follow only what is said, they follow what is lived. The ruler's life is the message. His speech may teach, but his conduct convinces. Confucius calls the truly noble man the Junzi, not one born of noble blood, but one made noble through effort. And the Junzi does not seek to control. He seeks to cultivate, to refine his thoughts, to polish his habits, to elevate his responses. He studies not to impress, but to become better. He practices rituals not as empty forms, but as a way to train the body to obey what is right. He honors his parents, restrains his speech, keeps his promises, treats others with respect, because he knows, before he can shape the world, he must shape himself. In the Confucian worldview, virtue is contagious. It spreads like fragrance in still air. When the nobleman walks uprightly, others are drawn to his example. They imitate not because they are forced, but because they are moved. This is not manipulation, it is moral resonance. That is why Confucius insisted, the nobleman first practices what he preaches, and then preaches only what he has practiced. This is the difference between influence and hypocrisy. The former leads by light, the latter corrupts by shadow. So what does cultivation look like? It begins in silence, in solitude, in small decisions. How do you speak when angry? How do you respond when wronged? Do you keep your word when it is inconvenient? Do you pursue what is right, even when no one is watching? These questions are not private, they are the seeds of public life. The man who cannot discipline his emotions will one day hurt others when given authority. The man who cannot speak truth to himself will one day lie to a nation. Confucius saw the danger of leadership without virtue. He lived in an age of crumbling states, broken rituals, and leaders who had titles but no character. And so he taught his students, reform does not begin at the top. It begins in the self. It begins with the man who wakes each day and asks not, what can I control? But, what must I correct in myself? For the one who cultivates his heart, who polishes his thoughts and disciplines his tongue, soon finds that others begin to change without needing to be commanded. His presence creates harmony. His voice carries weight. His decisions inspire confidence. He becomes a reference point in a disordered world. This is the way of the Junzi. He does not demand loyalty. He earns respect. He does not seek applause. He seeks inner alignment, and through that alignment, his very life becomes the first form of governance. So, before you wish to rule, cultivate. Before you command, refine. For he who governs himself with sincerity and virtue need not raise his voice. His conduct will speak for him. From the series, Rule the Self Before the World, Confucius on Inner Governance. Written in the composed and morally anchored voice of Confucius, emphasizing inner sincerity as the foundation of all true order. Laws can restrain the body, but only virtue can guide the heart. This was the wisdom of Confucius. In a world filled with regulations, punishments, and formal decrees, he did not reject law, but he warned of its limitations. Without internal harmony, laws are like fences around a wild field, briefly effective, but ultimately futile. Confucius said, "Lead the people with laws and regulate them with punishments, and they will try to avoid the punishment but have no sense of shame. Lead them with virtue and govern them with ritual, and they will develop a sense of shame, and thus correct themselves." This is not mere idealism. It is a deep understanding of human nature. People do not become moral by fear alone. They become moral when they are cultivated inwardly. When they are taught not just what is forbidden, but what is noble. And that teaching begins in the heart. If a person is inwardly disordered, filled with resentment, selfishness, vanity, or restlessness, then no number of rules will make him truly just. He may conform in public, but he will rebel in spirit. He may appear to obey, but he will harbor rebellion beneath his silence. But if the heart is trained, gently, persistently, with reflection and discipline, then the person begins to desire harmony, not just submit to it. He becomes a source of peace, not a subject of control. This, Confucius taught, is why ritual life is essential. Ritual is not superstition. It is the training of the soul through small, repeated acts of order, bowing before elders, speaking with restraint, entering a room with humility, offering food with reverence. Such practices are not trivial. They are the architecture of inner harmony. For what is practiced outwardly becomes habit, and what becomes habit, over time shapes character. Harmony, then, is not imposed, it is cultivated. This is why Confucius placed so much emphasis on music, poetry, and familial duties. He understood that beauty softens the spirit, that gratitude calms the will, that routine builds rhythm, and that together. These become a sanctuary for the heart. Without this sanctuary, even the most structured society will fall into chaos, because no law can substitute for a cultivated conscience. This is true for the ruler, for the minister, and for the common man. Harmony in the state is impossible without harmony in the homes, and harmony in the homes is impossible without harmony in the heart. So when Confucius was asked how to bring peace to a kingdom, he did not begin with policies. He began with the person. He said, "To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life. And to cultivate our personal life, we must first set our hearts right. That is the sequence. No shortcuts, no illusions. If you speak peace, but your heart is turbulent, your speech is noise. If you enforce justice, but are ruled by pride, your rule is hypocrisy. If you seek to correct others, but cannot govern your own tongue, your leadership will decay. But if your heart is calm, your speech will calm others. If your intentions are pure, your justice will be trusted. If your mind is ordered, your presence will bring clarity. Because the world does not follow words, it follows the rhythm of well-governed souls. So do not begin with laws, begin with yourself. Clean the heart, shape your conduct, restore balance inwardly, and outward harmony will follow. From the series, Rule the Self Before the World, Confucius on Inner Governance. Written in the composed, serious, and morally centered voice of Confucius, where inner mastery precedes and legitimizes all forms of outer leadership. To rule others without first ruling oneself is to build a tower upon sand. It may stand for a time, but it cannot last. Confucius said, "The noble man seeks it in himself, the petty man seeks it in others. A man who blames the world before correcting himself is not fit to lead. A man who commands others before conquering his own pride, temper, and greed is not leading, he is projecting. And projection does not create order. It multiplies disorder. True leadership, Confucius taught, begins not with external control, but with internal mastery. It begins in the morning, with the first thoughts of the day. It begins in how one treats his parents, in how one speaks to servants and listens to those beneath him, in how one restrains his speech, tempers his judgments, and disciplines his emotions. This is not dramatic, it is quiet, repetitive, invisible. But it is this invisible labor that gives a leader moral weight. Confucius called this the path of the Junzi, the noble man. He is not controlled by what he feels. He is not pulled by every desire. He governs his mind the way a ruler governs a state, with law, with principle, with balance. If anger arises, he does not deny it, but he does not serve it. If pride appears, he recognizes it, but does not let it speak. If praise comes, he bows inwardly and remains unchanged. This is strength, not the loud strength of conquest, but the silent strength of restraint. Confucius did not admire those who dominated others. He admired those who could hold themselves back. He said, "To conquer yourself and return to ritual. Is this not true nobility? This is a different model of power. It does not shout. It does not push. It draws. The man who has mastered himself becomes a center of order. Others trust him, not because of his words, but because of his consistency. He does not break under pressure. He does not waver with fashion. He does not demand respect. He earns it without asking. And when such a man governs, people follow, not because they fear punishment, but because they believe in his judgment." This is the ideal of Confucian leadership, not rule by fear, but rule by example, quiet, firm, moral example. This is why Confucius insisted that before a man governs a state, he must govern his household, and before he governs his household, he must govern himself. There is no bypassing this order. Any attempt to reverse it leads to disorder, deception, and collapse. Leadership is not a role, it is a reflection of the self. What you are within, you extend outward. If your soul is scattered, your leadership will be confused. If your soul is shallow, your influence will be short-lived. But if you are steady, others will anchor themselves in your presence. If you are disciplined, others will follow your rhythm. If you are just, others will begin to imitate your fairness, even without instruction. So ask not, how do I lead others? Ask first, how have I led myself, not once but daily, not in public but in private, not when seen but when tempted. For the one who masters himself becomes the measure for others. He becomes the standard, the model, the quiet guidepost, and from his self-rule flows the only kind of rule that lasts, rule by virtue. From the series, Rule the Self Before the World, Confucius on Inner Governance. Written in the grounded, wise, and hierarchical tone of Confucius, where the family is not a private matter, but the first domain of moral order. If you cannot rule a household with care and justice, you are not ready to rule a city or a nation. This was a central principle in the teaching of Confucius. He said, to put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life, and to cultivate our personal life, we must first set our hearts right. This is the Confucian sequence of order self, family state, world. It is a moral staircase. Each step prepares you for the next. Each failure to master the present step guarantees chaos in the next. Today, people speak of changing the world, but they cannot govern their tone with their parents. They cannot maintain peace with their spouse. They cannot model patience with their children, and yet they believe they are fit to reshape societies. Confucius would call this folly. The family, to him, is not a private retreat from society. It is the training ground of civilization. How you speak, how you listen, how you forgive, how you serve, these are not just domestic habits, they are moral muscles, and they are built, first and foremost, in the home. If a son disrespects his father, if a brother cheats his brother, if a husband fails in loyalty, do not expect him to govern strangers with justice. His failure is not personal, it is political. Because when such a man rises to power, he carries his disorder with him. Confucius placed great emphasis on filial piety, the respect and duty owed to parents. Not because parents are always perfect, but because this relationship teaches hierarchy, gratitude, and restraint. A child who honors his elders learns to submit to principle, not just impulse. He learns to serve something older, wiser, and greater than himself. And this is what prepares him for leadership. He does not rule from pride. He rules from a memory of service. He does not govern with arrogance. He governs with the humility of someone who has spent years learning to bow. In Confucian ethics, the family is a mirror of the state. The father is like a ruler, just, disciplined, protective. The mother is like a teacher, nurturing, wise, vigilant. The children are like citizens, learning to obey, speak honestly, and grow in responsibility. If the family is ruled by selfishness, neglect, and disrespect, it breeds confusion. And confusion does not stay behind closed doors. It leaks into the streets, into classrooms, into offices, into politics. But when the family is governed with order and virtue, it creates moral citizens, and moral citizens create strong communities. And strong communities produce wise leaders. This is why Confucius insisted that personal life and political life cannot be separated. A man's home is the first field where his principles are tested. If he is honest there, he will likely be honest in office. If he is violent there, he will likely be violent in public life. So do not dismiss small acts in the home as irrelevant. Every word at the dinner table, every decision in private, every expression of patience or selfishness, these are rehearsals for governance. And if you fail to rule yourself in the home, you will never rule a people with justice, because the habits you build in intimacy become the habits you carry into power. The family is the seed. From it grows the tree of the state. If the seed is rotten, the tree will bear poison. But if the family is governed with sincerity, respect, and virtue, then its children will grow into leaders the world can trust. From the series, Rule the Self Before the World, Confucius on Inner Governance. Written in the noble and didactic tone of Confucius, where the leader is not a controller of men, but a living standard that others willingly follow. The Junzi, the superior man, does not raise his voice to command respect. He does not strike fear to create order. He does not threaten to gain obedience. He simply lives the right way, and others, by instinct, begin to follow. This was the Confucian ideal of leadership. Not rule through force, but rule through moral presence. Confucius said, "The noble man is like the wind. The petty man is like the grass. When the wind moves, the grass must bend." He meant that true leaders do not need to coerce. Their integrity is so clear, their example so steady, that others bend not because they are broken, but because they are awakened. The inferior man tries to lead through control, shouting commands, issuing threats, punishing quickly. But control is brittle. It may secure silence, but never respect. It may create structure, but never harmony. But the superior man begins with himself. He rules his words. He disciplines his desires. He governs his anger. And through this invisible governance, he becomes a model, a moral compass for those around him. People trust him because he is the same in light and shadow. He speaks little, but what he speaks is weighty. He makes promises carefully and keeps them completely. He is not perfect, but he is reliable, calm, and just. In this way, the superior man becomes a living standard. Others imitate him not by command, but by admiration. His presence reminds them of their better selves. He becomes a mirror of virtue in a world of confusion. Confucius taught that the best rulers were like the North Star, fixed, silent, and steady, around which all other stars revolved. He said, "If you desire to establish yourself, establish others. If you desire to enlarge yourself, enlarge others." This is the paradox of Confucian leadership. The more you lead from character, the less you need to control by command. The more you govern yourself, the more others become self-governed. Because leadership is not about managing people. It is about inspiring alignment. When a man lives with honor, others remember what honor looks like. When he practices patience, others soften their tone. When he listens with humility, others speak with sincerity. He does not force change. He creates the conditions in which change becomes desirable. The superior man is not anxious to dominate. He does not compete for applause. He simply asks, "Have I lived today in a way that others would be better for having seen me?" This kind of leadership is slow, it is quiet, but it is lasting. Governments may rise and fall, laws may be rewritten, but the man who has led through example, his influence endures long after he is gone. Because people do not remember titles, they remember character. They do not imitate positions, they imitate persons. So if you wish to lead, become first the person you would gladly follow. Do not begin with strategies. Begin with stillness. Do not begin with commands. Begin with clarity. Let your life speak before your words do. Let your restraint shape others more than your rules. Let your presence inspire trust before your title demands it. Because in the Confucian view, the highest power is not to control others. It is to become the kind of man who makes others want to govern themselves. And that, truly, is leadership. Rule the self before the world. Confucius on Inner Governance. Written in the serene, dignified, and timeless voice of Confucius, offering a final call to self-cultivation as the path to societal harmony. Before nations are stable, men must become upright. Before laws bring peace, hearts must be trained. Before the world can be led, the self must be ruled. This is not mere theory, it is the foundation of Confucius' lifelong teaching. He lived in a time of collapsing dynasties, broken trust, and shallow leadership. Yet he did not shout in anger, nor flee from duty. He turned inward, refining his character, disciplining his thoughts, and offering a model that reached beyond chaos. Because Confucius understood the most enduring form of order begins within. The noble man, the Junzi, does not begin with ambition, he begins with conduct, he bows before his elders, he speaks with care, he governs his habits with quiet strength, and through this daily discipline, he becomes a man others can trust, follow, and emulate. He does not seek applause. He seeks alignment, with truth, with tradition, with virtue. And through that alignment, he becomes more powerful than any decree, more enduring than any regime. Confucius never ruled an empire. Yet emperors studied his words. He never wore a crown. Yet his name became a measure of civilization. Why? Because the man who rules himself leaves behind something greater than law. He leaves behind moral influence. So, if you wish to lead, begin not with speeches, begin with silence. Begin with how you treat those who cannot benefit you. Begin with how you behave when no one is watching, because that is where governance begins. The world will always need rulers, judges, and reformers. But more than anything, it needs examples. Be that example, not once but daily, not for praise but for principle, not to dominate the world, but to bring it back into harmony, starting with yourself. This is the Confucian way. It is not easy, but it is lasting, and in a disordered age, the soul that stands upright in silence leads more surely than the one that shouts from the throne.